I came back from a business trip early, and no sooner had I walked in through the door that my daughter actually sprinted towards me and nearly tackled me in a hug. Tears were running down her face, and I immediately suspected something terrible had happened. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" When she finally stopped crying, she told me a story that I could never have seen coming. If what she told me was all true, then my husband and a certain other person who hurt her had to be punished accordingly. I was not going to rest until the traitors got the rightful backlash they deserved from their cruel actions on me and my daughter. This is the story of how my nice life with my family was single-handedly ruined by the relationship between me and a certain individual, and how my eventual divorce took me so much needless time and effort to finalize. Nevertheless, it was finalized, and I received a good deal of compensation. So all was well in the end, and this is also a story about how important it can be to take drastic measures to protect your own dignity, and that of the people you hold closest to heart. My name is Alicia Courtenay, and I am a 38-year-old office worker. My husband, Gwydion, is 4 years older than me and also works in the same workplace as I do. Exotic name, I know, Gwydion. You'll find out why soon enough. Anyway, the fact that we worked in the same office was precisely how we met in the first place. He was assigned to be my mentor when I was first hired into the company, and thanks to his guidance, I was able to climb the ranks very quickly. And I later achieved the title of youngest person to be promoted to executive assistant section manager when I turned 22. Our personal lives grew closer and closer as time went on as well, and thanks to him confessing his feelings to me about a year after we met, we started a relationship that lasted 2 years. The boyfriend-girlfriend relationship ended when we married 15 years ago, and now we have a 12-year-old daughter by the name of Marcia. And she was just about to enter a private junior high school that following spring. Although both of us were busy with work, as we both held esteemed positions in our own departments. Gwydion was later transferred. We were living a peaceful life together as a family of 3. The only thing that concerned me was my relationship with Elizabeth Courtenay, my mother-in-law, who lived about 30 minutes away by car from our house. My in-laws were married by my father-in-law, Norman, changing his name as he married her. They lived in the house where my Elizabeth was born and raised. You see, the Courtenay family is of noble lineage, descended from large landowners in Wales. And they were still powerful when I married into the family. Elizabeth was very proud of her bloodline, enough to name her son a very Welsh name. But that pride could be acknowledged as borderline psychotic. She had always told me to my face that I was not from the kind of family that would give their daughter, of unknown lineage, no less, to be her daughter-in-law. Both Norman and Gwydion were ordinary company employees, but they say that they were born differently from me, with some name to their, name. Elizabeth was opposed to our marriage because of my ordinary family background, but my father-in-law insisted that their son had chosen her to be the new lady of the family, so to speak, and we were able to get married in the end. I had heard talk of it even before we got married, and I had nothing but anxiety about this. But Gwydion wanted us to live together with his family at the beginning of our marriage. But even after we moved in together, whenever I cooked, "Oh, no, I care not for it. I care not for the food made by people who are bored, unthrifty." When I found out that my way of doing housework was different from hers, she wouldn't hesitate to throw all the work away without even saying a word of appreciation. Instead, she got furious and said, "That's what happens to low-life daughters whom ne'er hast any meet education." Such was my daily life, getting insulted in old noble English day by day and without any sign of improvement in my relationship with her. One day, a few months after moving into her house, there was a commotion that money was missing from Elizabeth's purse. "There's a cut purse in this house."
Of course not. Let's just look around a little more.
"No, of course. Miss Alicia took the money."
That's enough. There's no way dear Alicia would do such a thing.
"There could be no other cut purse than this woman, whom was born and raised in a place for swine." From the very beginning, Elizabeth was suspicious of me and lashed out in anger. Of course I denied it, and both Gwydion and Norman defended me, but she kept telling me that she did not feel safe with a thief in the house. After nearly a year of daily accusations of missing money and jewelry from this impossible woman, I finally lost it and broke down. I had to go to a psychiatrist, and the doctor recommended that I live separately from the cause of all the stress. I pretty much begged my husband to let us live apart so that I could return to work and provide for the two of us. After repeated pleas, he finally agreed to the separation as long as it would make me feel better. Even after the separation, however, the mere mention of Gwydion talking to his mother on the phone caused my heart to palpitate. But I decided that it was all the better that we weren't living together anymore. 6 months after we separated, Norman Courtenay, who had been so kind to me, passed away. I was supposed to have attended the funeral as a member of his family, but my seat was not reserved as one for relatives.
Mother, where should Alicia sit?
I know not. Should there not a member of mine issue, why do not thou sit somewhere else? I understand, your ladyship.
Alicia?
It's your last goodbye to your father, darling. Don't worry about me. What a way to treat me. Even if it was just to harass me for deciding to live separately from her. But I decided to take it as a sign that I wasn't kicked out of the family entirely, given that she never told me to get lost. It was enough for me to say goodbye to my father-in-law, who had always been such a sweetheart, and it made me happy that he was in a better place, away from his abhorrent wife. 6 months after that, 12 years ago, I gave birth to my daughter, Mauricia. The first thing Elizabeth did when she visited me in the hospital after the birth was to tickle my daughter's feet. She tickled my daughter's feet, and Mauricia squealed as she laughed. I be just relieved that the blood seems to be running right in this one. What a thing to say, your ladyship. You're forsooth a bootless wife for giving birth to a female in the first place. That's what my mother-in-law shouted as she left the hospital room. She didn't even congratulate me. It was an incident that made me feel even more disgusted with her for doing such a thing not only to me, but also to my daughter. After that, Elizabeth never hesitated to tell my daughter that she was of impure blood and discriminated against her with my sister-in-law's children. So even though she was Mauricia's grandmother, she did not really get close to her very much.
I think Mauricia doesn't get close with Mother because of your attitude towards her, Alicia.
Do you really think so? Wouldn't it be better to admonish those who say their own grandchildren have, and I quote, impure blood first?
You just have to be willing to step up to the challenge.
I can't do this anymore. I want as little to do with her as possible, Gwydion. Since then, I had tried to avoid seeing Elizabeth as much as possible, so I didn't see her anymore at all except for family events such as weddings and funerals. But more than 10 years later, whenever I still saw her, I couldn't stop myself from shaking with disgust and resentment. It was impossible for me to come to a compromise with someone whose mind and body had rejected me so much. So my only wish was to maintain our nice life as a family of 3. However, as soon as it was decided that Mauricia would be entering a private junior high school, Elizabeth began to contact me frequently. My daughter herself had wanted to go to a private junior high school, and Elizabeth was quite unresponsive to that. But when she found out that the school was one of prestigious fame, Elizabeth called and excitedly said, "Now that's a granddaughter I be proud of." She was very happy to know that her granddaughter was accepted to a prestigious junior high school. I was just stunned at how quickly Mauricia had gone from being a child of impure blood to a granddaughter she can be proud of. My daughter and I were suspicious at how quickly Elizabeth was changing, seemingly for the better. But Gwydion, perhaps thinking that his wife and daughter were finally being recognized by his noble mother, began to say the words, "Mother is," more and more often.
Mother is going to buy Mauricia a new pair of shoes, so why don't we go shopping sometime today?
Shoes? Sorry, darling, but the school has designated shoes. And Mauricia said she doesn't really need anything to wear on holidays right now.
Why don't you 3 have dinner every once in a while? Try to close the distance between you.
I'm sorry, I don't think that's going to happen. If you want to go out to dinner with your mother, you can go out together. Can you tell her we'll do it again next time?
When will this next time be, though? Alicia, I'm getting sick and tired of watching my own wife and daughter not get along with Mother. I do admit she was pretty difficult to handle during the first few years of our life together, but things are looking up, right? She's genuinely happy that Mauricia's pursuing good education, and she's been wanting to talk to her granddaughter for some time now. You're pretty much depriving her of any opportunity to reconcile.
You wouldn't be saying these things if you were the target of the abuse, Gwydion. Listen to me. When she called me a woman born of place for swine, she was actively and purposefully insulting my own parents, who we both know are in a better place. Insulting someone's parents in itself is already pretty ridiculous, but insulting deceased parents adds to the brutality. And also, the sheer amount of abuse was unfathomable. She literally called me slurs every day and even condemned my family, Mauricia included. Now, you tell me, can I reconcile with a person who's gone out of her way to torture me in such ways? No, I don't think I can, nor will I ever try.
Mauricia, you want to see your grandmother, don't you?
If Mom's not going to see her, I'm not either. Plus, I have to study for the test to decide which class I'll be in after I go to school.
What the hell? Need and greed do be passed down, for real. To hell with you two.
Maybe I just needed to be patient for a few hours. I know Elizabeth was my husband's mother, and I know how important it is to him that his wife and daughter get along with her. But after everything I've been through, I knew I was never willing to step up to the plate. I wondered how long it would take for me to be able to even think about Elizabeth again, let alone be in the same room with her. It was more difficult for me because my husband sometimes actively tried to force me to meet his mother, and that merely intensified my hatred for Miss Courtenay. Then one day, I was assigned a business trip for 5 days. I wasn't worried about Mauricia and food, since she could already cook simple meals pretty well by herself, but I was worried about her being alone in the house until he came home late from work.
Don't worry, Mom. Everything will be fine. You'll call me every night, right?
Yes, of course. I'll call you every night, but please just make sure the door is locked, okay?
Of course.
I left Mauricia in my husband's care and went on a business trip. Every night after I went back to the hotel, I called Mauricia, as promised. Whenever I did, Gwydion was always away from the house working, but other than that, everything seemed to be going well. The next day, I finished work earlier than expected, and that night I told my daughter I would be back tomorrow. Then I noticed something strange about my daughter's tone of voice. Anything wrong, sweetheart?
No. I'm just waiting for you to come home, Mom. Get home soon, okay?
It sounded like Mauricia was desperately appealing to me, and I instantly felt uneasy. I was worried about my daughter, so I boarded the bullet train first thing in the morning and went directly home. When I arrived home, I found that my daughter, who would soon graduate, had finished her classes in the morning and had returned home too. I'm home!
Mom!
No sooner had I walked in through the door that my daughter actually sprinted towards me and nearly tackled me in a hug. Oh dear, did you want to be spoiled a little? Come, let's have lunch for now.
Yes, okay.
As I was preparing the meal, Mauricia would come up to me as if she wanted to say something, then sigh deeply and go back. And so on and so forth. When I put the food on the table, she quickly sat down but did not seem to want to touch it. She looked extremely pensive, as if she was thinking really hard about something particularly unpleasant. Anything the matter, sweetheart? I asked her.
It's about Dad.
The poor darling could barely even finish her sentence before she choked up and started to cry. Oh God, this was no time to be eating. How could I have been so stupid? I took her to the living room and sat down next to her on the family couch. Calming her down and listening to what she had to say was now of utmost importance. When you calm down, talk to me, okay? Slowly. Take your time, sweetheart.
Okay, well, Grandmother came to the house the same day you went on your business trip, Mom. She said she was going to stay over for a while, but she was gone during the day and came home with my dad at night, so I didn't really care that she was staying with us, but on the third night after she arrived, I overheard her and Dad talking about something in the living room.
What did they talk about?
Dad said that 6 months ago, per Grandmother's suggestion, he had decided on an arranged marriage and had started looking for a potential candidate. An arranged marriage is between two people who are going to get married in the future, right? I mean, it's really strange to do that, right? Given that he's married to you.
Yes, it is very strange.
I knew it! Anyway, Dad said that he started looking 6 months ago, and now he's in his 4 months of being in a relationship with a woman who's going to be his next wife. He said that he had the intention of divorcing you, Mom, in order to marry this woman.
I see. So that's what they were talking about. Elizabeth was against my marriage to Gwydion in the first place, and she would definitely agree to divorce me in a frickin' heartbeat. Perhaps my husband's frustrations with my apparent lack of interest in his mother's lonely life was getting far too great for him to handle any longer. And he may actually be considering a divorce.
But, Mom, it gets worse. Last night, Dad actually brought this woman home and introduced her to me. And you know what he said? You want to know the words he used to introduce a complete stranger to me?
What did he say?
He told me, "This is going to be your new mother, Mauricia." I was so scared, and I told them that you were my only mom forever and ever, but then they got so mad at me saying that a woman with such impure blood was never my mother and never would be. They were both so scary, and
She started crying again, and I hugged her tight.
Dad was... How could he? Oh, I'm just so glad that you came home earlier than he did, Mom. I don't know if I can even look at him after what happened.
Oh, God. You sure had a lot of bad experiences while I was away on my business trip. I'm so sorry you had to go through all that on your own, sweetheart. It must have been so hard.
It's not your fault, Mom.
Just as she finished speaking, I heard the front door open.
Hey, Mauricia. You home? The locksmith is coming in a few hours and to change the lock. So, give me that spare key to the front door you have, okay?
With that, Gwydion came into the living room where my daughter and I sat, staring at him with wide eyes. He gasped the moment he saw me sitting next to Mauricia.
What? How? You're on a business trip until tomorrow, Alicia. How are you home so soon?
I finished work early, darling.
Oh, I see. Well, great job, I guess.
With that, he quickly left the living room, perhaps to call his mother about the sudden, unfortunate turn of events. As he went into his room, I took this opportunity to take my daughter's hand and leave the house. The house was in his name. If he wanted to get rid of me so badly by changing the lock on the front door without my knowing about it, there was no stopping him. Hell, he could even sell the house and move all the furniture to Elizabeth's mansion if he had the time and resources, the latter of which I was quite certain he did. Now, I'm not saying I haven't had my fair share of blame in all the bad experiences Gwydion and I had in our 15 years of marriage. I was sure that other people could have gotten through similar situations with patience and perseverance. I think I was just a weak person and chose the cowardly way out of a toxic relationship with my mother-in-law. But I couldn't forgive Gwydion for not formally filing for divorce before going on with the marriage procedure. I couldn't forgive him for suddenly introducing a total stranger as a new mother to Mauricia, who was at an impressionable age and could easily think for herself and make connections between one's words and the meaning behind them, and for using such a frightening method to try and get her into his custody. I decided to return to my parents' home and hire a lawyer to formally file for divorce. Gwydion and Elizabeth both obliged, telling me they wanted the divorce just as much as I did, by this point, but they wanted Mauricia in their custody. Gwydion just didn't want to lose his daughter, whom he genuinely loved, despite his act of betrayal against her. And Elizabeth claimed Mauricia as her most prized heir to inherit the Courtenay estate, which absolutely disgusted me, because my daughter herself told me on multiple occasions that she honestly despised what her grandmother did for a living, claiming it was boring and monotonous. My daughter was only 12 years old by this point, and she wasn't of legal age to choose who could have custody of her. But I still did have a full-time job and had a good income, just like my soon-to-be ex-husband. I decided to fight them head-on. I was not going to rest until the traitors got the rightful backlash they deserved from their cruel actions on me and my daughter. We were unable to come to an agreement on the divorce through our respective attorneys, and the matter ended up in divorce arbitration. Here are the facts. It was true that the reason for the breakdown of my marriage with Gwydion Courtenay was an uncomfortable relationship between my mother-in-law and I. But I kept a diary that I kept when we lived together, which recorded most of the terrible things Elizabeth said to me and to Mauricia. This, along with the records of my psychosomatic visits to a mental health clinic, were acknowledged as solid evidence of emotional distress over the course of a prolonged period of time. Gwydion was evaluated as being supportive to me for listening to my pleas to live separately from Miss Courtenay, but his faithfulness to me was eventually called into question because he was meeting another woman during our marriage, and started a relationship with her. It was decided that his sins outweighed his good deeds, and was found guilty of committing adultery. The court officer also allowed my daughter to testify, even though she was under the legal age of 15 years old. Mauricia told the court she wanted to live with me because of her father's dishonesty, and her grandmother's constant harassment of calling her a child of impure blood. Thus, the arbitration granted me custody over my daughter. Elizabeth wouldn't admit defeat and insisted that we would go to court, but Gwydion said he would give up trying to get custody. Our divorce was finalized with Mrs. Courtenay paying me compensation for psychological abuse, and Gwydion paying me alimony for the affair and a lump sum of child support. I also claimed alimony from the woman whom he was cheating on me with, because she knew he was married and still decided to arrange a marriage with him. And I heard that she left Gwydion, whose only pride was his family background. Miss Courtenay said, "How good doth all of this to us? Thou needst hast taken so much from us, and now look at what you've done. Thou undone Gwydion's potential fortunate marriage, thou frickin' greedy bitch!" I merely smirked, as I'd only decided to take what I could get considering my future life with Mauricia, who was going to a prestigious private middle school. After everything ended like this, everything seems so easy right now as I bring this story to a close. I remember the last time I saw my mother-in-law that day, at the Court of Domestic Relations, and I wonder what all those days of being frightened by that little woman were about. Later, after our divorce, my mother-in-law lost her granddaughter, whom she had boasted about going to a prestigious middle school, and the whole neighborhood knew that she had been unfair to her daughter-in-law. Furthermore, word got out that she was insane enough to introduce her married son to another woman, and she was no longer able to continue living in the house where she was born and raised. She gave up the house and moved in with her son, but he had quit his job because he felt too uncomfortable at his workplace after the incident. So I heard that their life was now very plain, simple, and poor. As for me, I started a new life with Mauricia in a new environment. My work is going well, and my daughter has to bear more of a burden than ever before. What with her studies and being home alone most of the time, but I'm going to do my absolute best to support her, both morally and financially, and do what I can until she grows up to be a hopefully independent, educated lady with a bright future ahead of her. And this time, I want to live my own life properly as well. Wish us luck!